Hello, Year 9. Welcome to your next geography lesson. So you learnt last lesson some of the main causes of deforestation. Well, today we're going to move on and look at the impacts of that. But before we do that, I'd like you to just do a quick recap task, write down 3 causes of deforestation, and for each one say why this happens. Got 5 minutes to do this. Pause the video now. Okay, fantastic. So causes of deforestation. If you remember, there were way more than 3. You could have picked from energy, building dams such as the Bakun Dam in Malaysia. You could have talked about road building, how population pressure means that people were moved through transmigration into the rural areas of Malaysia, and therefore had to build houses and cut down a forest to farm and grow food for themselves. You could talk about commercial farming, such as palm oil. You could have talked about subsistence farming, where, remember, people grow food to feed themselves, much more low impact. Slash and burn being a particular example there of how the forests were cut down, whereas clear felling was a key term from commercial farming, where you cut down everything. What have I missed? The mining. Yes, mining, open pit mining especially, where you just dig out the entire area and cause that deforestation. There we go. So let's move on. Today we're looking at what are the impacts of deforestation. Could you write that title down, please? You're going to need a pen today, and that is it. So yeah, read through the 4 different impacts on the screen. Write the title. Should take about a minute. Pause the video now. Excellent. So impact number 1, write the subtitle soil erosion and copy that definition. It's about the soil being removed, eroded away. It can be done by water, it can be done by wind. There are other ways of doing it, but those are the 2 most common ones. So write the subtitle, write the definition, and we'll move on. Pause the video now. Okay, so we're going to find out how the land surface affects soil erosion. Why specifically does deforestation lead to soil erosion? So watch the video, YouTube link on the screen, and it starts 1 minute 38 seconds in. Find out what happens to the 3 bottles. You're going to see a science experiment, and could you write up what happens for each of them, and then at the end summarize the overall point. How does the land surface affect soil erosion? Pause the video now. So what you should have seen is that when the soil was bare, when there was just soil, lots of that soil is eroded. When there were some dead leaves, some soil was eroded, and when plants were growing on it, very little, if any, soil was eroded at all. Why? Well, as I explained in the video, it's to do with the roots holding that soil together, giving it a stronger basis to stay together and therefore not be eroded away. As you can see on the picture that was being up on the screen, where there's grass, there's limited soil erosion, but where there's bare soil, that's where this gully, this channel of water is eroded down into it. And the summary, well, something along the lines of deforestation makes soil erosion more likely. That's the key here. If we cut trees down, there's more likely to be soil erosion. And remember, in the tropical rainforest, the fertile layer of soil is very, very thin. And it only really exists because it's constantly replenished by the trees, by the vegetation dying and falling to the ground, being decomposed. And if that's broken, if those trees are removed, the soil is then washed away by the heavy rain. Again, remember, a characteristic of rainforest is its heavy rain. Got heavy rain washing it away. There's nothing to replenish it. We could be left with essentially a desert. Not a desert in temperature, not a desert in how dry it is, but it would look like one. Just bare rock, infertile soil, and nothing much growing on it. So biodiversity is our second impact. You've got another video to watch and 3 questions to answer. Answer them in 4 sentences. Pause the video now. Okay, some answers for you. So biodiversity is a number of different species living in an ecosystem. Doesn't matter how much of each of those species there are. If you had one place with one species that was dominant, millions of them, that actually would be a low biodiversity. It would not be very diverse. So it's about the number of different species, and it's generally considered The higher the biodiversity, the more species there are, the better. How does deforestation affect it? Well, it reduces it, surprisingly enough, by removing habitats, and it changes the food web. Go back a few lessons and you learn about how wolves being reintroduced to Yellowstone changed the food web for the better there, because it increased, if you remember, the biodiversity. There were more species as a result. By removing the wolves, though, well, that reduced biodiversity back in the days when they hunted them. Final question, how are humans affected by this change? Well, it affects us hugely. Loss of medicinal chemicals and food. We rely on ecosystems for food. We are not magically able to grow things without the aid of the natural world. Okay, third and penultimate, second to last, impact, climate change. Write the subtitle, another video, watch the video, and you've got 3 questions again to answer. Don't forget, 4-sentence answers here. These notes are going to be pretty useless if they're just a series of random words. Make it so that it makes sense to future you. Pause the video now. Okay, excellent. Let's look at some answers. 24% forestry and agriculture contributes to greenhouse gas emissions. The amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere when trees are cut down, when they're felled, or deforestation occurs, well, they do 2 things. They release the carbon dioxide that they're storing, but they also stop absorbing it. So it's a double-edged sword there. And finally, we have methane, nitrous oxide, water vapor, and the, interesting to say, chlorofluorocarbons. Chlorofluorocarbon. Ooh, I got that wrong. Chlorofluorocarbons. There we go. Great. Get those answers down if you haven't already. If any errors, please correct them. And let's move to the last impact. Okay, economic development. A topic that actually we're going to move on to. Next topic after rainforests is all about economic development. So we'll go into that in a lot more detail soon. But for now, deforestation can lead to short-term economic gains, but long-term economic losses. Remember, the economy being money, jobs, trade, those kind of things. So write the subtitle, copy that sentence, and we'll move on. Pause the video. Okay, final task for the day. On the board, you've got 2 boxes. You've got economic gains and economic losses, good and bad things, essentially. Pick 2 gains and 2 losses. Doesn't matter to me which ones you pick. You pick whichever ones you think you can do a best job of explaining. And on the board there, in the brackets, you've got some connectives that you could use. So, which means that, therefore. And I've given you an example here. And I'd like you to copy this example down, but this does not count as one of your 2 for either of those. You're then going to do another 2 gains, another 2 losses. So HEP, hydroelectric power, will provide cheap and plentiful energy, which means there's a connective there. Locally, the area will benefit by employing people to work in the energy plant. And it will also benefit nationally by selling this energy abroad. So I've explained why HEP is good. Yes, it's cheap and plentiful energy. That's what I've read from the boxes, but I've gone a little bit further and I've started to explain why that's good. How does that affect this country, this place? So over to you for the final task of the day. Pick 2 gains, 2 losses, and explain them. Pause the video now. Okay, well, that's the end of the lesson. Those are the impacts of deforestation. You can see why it's one of the more serious environmental issues that this planet faces. It links to many other serious ones, such as climate change. And it is why there are so many campaigns out there to plant trees. For example, I know I use, on my phone, I use the Ecosia internet browser. They, for every advert you click on searching, they plant trees. And they've planted millions and millions and millions of trees in the time they've been around. And there's the famous campaign online from YouTubers to plant trees, and the list goes on. This is why people are so passionate about trees, is because they have so much importance when it comes to the world around us, not just to the natural world, but to us as well. Anyway, there we go. Have a great day. Take care, and I shall speak to you soon. Bye-bye.